And this was a story that really kind of hit me hard because it reminded me the other angle of what we're doing, that we have to make sure that we convert people to our side. And we have to realize in this story we'll talk about that. And it's an excerpt, and I really think that if you, once we're done, or if you're following along and you have the show notes open, this is a story that I think everyone should read, just to remind you that a lot of the people that we perceive as adversaries in this fight are just a little bit of a perspective away from seeing things as we do. And so I want to read this with that in mind, that it's very important that we don't fight, we don't punch water because we won't get people on our side that way. We got to fight, there's no question. But people can be difficult, people can be unique, but we need to get them on our side.
People can change.
People can change. So let's talk about it. This is a personalized story. I didn't expect a stupid internet fight to alter the course of my life, but in 2016, a lot of my relationships were being torn apart by one man, Bernie Sanders. Jake, a comedian who I'd never met in real life, tweeted a joke about Clinton that I thought was sexist. Still scarred from 2016, I told him off. Our argument escalated quickly, and we agreed that there was, quote, no reason to ever communicate in the future, end quote. Bernie bros, man. There is one good thing to come out of the experience, though. Getting to know Rashav. How do you say that again, Kit?
Rashav.
I want to make sure I get it right. Rashav, yeah,
Rashav.
so I had it right. A thoughtful comic I talked to at comedy shows. We had occasionally messaged about politics, so it didn't surprise me to see him liking my tweets arguing with Jake, although I didn't know at the time that they hosted a political podcast together. Despite being a feminist, I spent years secretly feeling that I'd always have to tone down my opinions and hide my strengths to avoid scaring a guy off. But he wasn't scared of my talents and passions. He loved me for them. That's Rashav. We both had hard childhoods, felt like outcasts in school, and made parties weird by talking about politics. Rashav slid into a deep depression. He'd had depression for some time, but was managing it with Lexapro. Although Rashav's day job didn't give him insurance, a former doctor continued to call in his prescription. A fix he knew wouldn't last forever. When the side effects of the medication became overwhelming, Rashad went off it. When his depression worsened, he tried to self-medicate with Zoloft that he got from a friend. It didn't work. He couldn't afford to see a psychiatrist. Talk therapy was too expensive. And although his friends and I offered to help him with the cost, he understandably wanted to handle it himself. Many days Rashad slept until 5 p.m. Every day I scrambled and failed to find ways to cheer him up. His depression made him angry. One of the biggest arguments we ever had was about Medicare for all. Although I didn't have insurance, I believed that with tweaks to Obamacare, our problems could be solved. Rashad believed true Medicare for all healthcare was free at the point of service with everyone automatically enrolled was a life or death issue. It turned out he was right. 6 months after we said I love you, Rashad was dead. I was told his death was an accident, self-medicating gone wrong. When pills weren't working, Rashad drank in an effort to numb his inescapable pain. I'm convinced he'd still be here if he had health insurance to get the care he needed. At his funeral, I finally met Jake, the person she was mentioning earlier that she didn't want to talk to. The Bernie bro I swore I'd never speak to. About 45,000 people in the U.S. die every year from not having insurance. After his death, I was steeped in the kind of pain I didn't know was possible. Heavy, consuming, shattering. I finally understood how Rashad felt all the time. The only thing that really helped was trying to better understand Rashad's politics. I followed the journalists he followed on Twitter. I read his favorite political authors. I retraced his steps to understand how he'd make sense of a tragedy like this. I didn't grieve alone. Rashad's Bernie bro friends were not a bunch of sexists after all. Some were socialist feminist women. Some were great guys. In the months that followed Rashad's death, They made sure I ate and didn't isolate myself. We've stayed up till 3 a.m. working on jokes and talking about Bernie Sanders. This weekend, all of us, including Jake, are heading to New Hampshire to canvass for Bernie, the only 2020 candidate whose unequivocally supports Medicare for all. I'm one of the bros now, I guess. I recently went out to lunch with a friend I used to hate on Sanders in 2016. She's supporting Joe Biden now, whose healthcare plan would leave 10 million people uninsured. As well as I could, I attempted to persuade her any other candidate's plan means people will keep dying, preventable deaths. But I don't think she was convinced. I try not to get too mad because before it hit home for me, I couldn't fully grasp the reality either. I used to think supporting Sanders would also somehow make me less of a feminist. Now, I know it couldn't be further from the truth. My feminism needs to fight for women who don't have $500 a month to spend on health insurance. Health insurance premiums, for single moms working 3 part-time jobs and still not making ends meet, for women who can't leave an abusive marriage because her insurance is tied to her husband's job. In 2016, I thought Bernie was polarizing economic issues over women's issues. Now I understand that they're connected. Contrary to the Bernie bro narrative, the growing progressive movement in this country is multiracial, includes all genders, and is full of people who deeply care about creating a better world for everyone, including future generations. Anyone telling you otherwise is likely not on your side. I even kind of like when Sanders yells now, because he's yelling for me, he's yelling for Rishav. Now this, I think, is a very important story to remember, not just today, not just tomorrow, but a week, a month, a year later from now. It's reminding you that we're all people and we're all trying to do the best that we can. That's why I don't begrudge people who don't support Sanders. I mean, there's exceptions. But we have to understand that to get people to see things as we do, we have to get them to see things as we do. And in this person's case, it was the death of someone that they loved.
Right.
That got them to see that, when I just talk about making these small adjustments to Obamacare, that's not going to cut it. We have to make sure we keep trying, because one thing that Sanders has already won on is the issues.
Yeah.
He's won on Medicare for all. He's won on minimum wage. He's won on keeping Social Security and expanding it. He's won on climate change fighting, Green New Deal. He's won on all of these issues. So right now we're like in a spot where we're trying to get people to go, by the way, he's also super electable and you shouldn't have to worry about that. Like, I've had a ton of conversations with people that I know aren't specifically with Bernie, but every time they ask me, hey, Daniel, I don't think Bernie Sanders can win. I always give them my full attention, my full time, and explain to them, even if I have to do it 3 or 4 times, why I think Sanders is the right person, why he's electable, why he can defeat Trump. But one thing I usually don't have to explain to them, Matt, anymore that I did back in 2016 is, hey, is Sanders right on the issues? Because he is. Right. And it's up to us to make sure we get people to remember that Sanders is right on the issues and he's changed everything, and not push them away, bring them in.
So looking at this article, and this article was released last week, the whole narrative of Bernie Bro and the way corporate media ran with it is insulting, because look at who's running Bernie Sanders' campaign. Yeah, Bernie Sanders is running for president, but who is the people that's making his message heard? 70% of his campaign leadership are women of color, women of different backgrounds, women of different age groups. They're all working to get him to win the nomination and also into the White House. They're working hard. They're knocking on people's doors. They're doing phone banks. They're holding rallies. They're getting it done. And the whole idea that the corporate media and the DNC establishment was using this term, Bernie Bros, was as a way to dividing people. And we're not, granted, we're all going to have different points of views and different opinions, but we're better than that. People are always going to disagree. But the very fact that right now in the United States, 500,000 Americans go bankrupt because of medical bills. So many people die in this country because we just can't have affordable health care. That has to stop. And here you're having somebody who was, at one point listened to corporate media and was told that, Bernie Bros are sexist and misogynist. She met a Bernie bro. Okay, literally a guy, a Bernie bro, and turns out it was farther from the truth, and sadly he lost his life. But now she understands what he was fighting for. She understands what Bernie Sanders represents. But the thing is, Bernie Sanders isn't going to be around forever. This is where all of us need to step up and stand for each other. Because if we don't stand for each other, we will fall. We got to fight for that better future. And the first step is stepping outside our bubbles and learning to communicate with each other. Because that's who we are as Americans, and that's who we are as citizens, and that's why we're doing this right here at Heartlands Media.
I want to give a shout out to really quick. I know Paul wants to say something, but
Yeah.
I remember this stuck with me because I watched the Joe Rogan Experience a lot, and he had up the guy. I forget the guy's name, but this was this guy who had convinced over 250 Klansmen to leave the Klan, and he was an African American individual. And what he would do is he would sit down with meetings to these guys. He'd go, "Can you explain to me what your ideology is?" And he went into it the entire podcast. He would just listen when they would say things that were completely incorrect in so many different ways, so hateful in so many different ways. He didn't reach out. He didn't fight them. He just said, "Oh, I disagree with that." And eventually he would just get to the point where he would build these relationships with them. And then he would befriend them. And then many of them would just go, "I can't believe in this ideology anymore. I'm going to quit." So if an African American individual can pull 250 Klans members out of the Klan, a bunch of neo-Nazis out, and we're talking like they're like not just like foot soldiers, and we're talking like
High echelon leadership.
like the generals, the lieutenants of the organization. If he can do that, we don't have any excuse to fight with these people. The best way we win is to build these relationships, because I think that it's true. When they realize that we aren't the enemy, we aren't trying to be sexist. In fact, we think that real equality is an ultimate goal that we have to achieve, and economics is perhaps the most efficient way to deal with it, but also the social issues as well. And we realize that they are people trying to live their lives too. That's where we can really come together as a people and win.
Yep. And we all have to fight for a better future and make it happen.